Beyond Boulder is one of the earliest notable DLC-sized mods for New Vegas, and the strongest case for withholding judgment until the end that I've probably ever seen in modding. What I mean by that is that this mod fluctuates in quality so sharply that if you judge it for any one part, you'd be blinding yourself to the rest of it. Today we're going to be walking through all of what makes this mod good in all the ways it's good, and bad in all the ways that it's bad. Beyond Boulder takes the player to Boulder, Colorado to embark on a story involving ghouls, the NCR, the Brotherhood of Steel, and monkeys. Let's do this. The mod starts at a job posting board in the old Mormon fort for weapons testing. As we pick this up, a woman leaves, and the quest log leads me to believe that she's running off mysteriously, but something's bugged, so she just kinda walks away slowly. It's a great start, really. I suppose before going any further, it's worth mentioning that this is indicative of wider issues of performance, stability, and scripting. Part of this just lies in the fact that this mod's pretty old, and modders in 2012 didn't have the same tools and techniques that they do now. This is still worth mentioning anyway, because it will impact your experience regardless of whether or not the modders at the time had any way to fix it. Unfortunately, the mod crashes extremely often. I experienced a crash nearly every 10 minutes for the entire runtime on a fresh load order with only the standard set of fixes that everyone puts into New Vegas to make it run smooth. I don't even want to begin to imagine how this mod would perform with other mods stacked on top of it. That being said, I'm not really the type of person who gets infuriated with crashes. It's like when an older car takes a few cranks to get it started. You're annoyed with it in the moment, it might slow your day down by a couple seconds, but in the end, it's not that big a deal. It's part of the rustic charm. If you save often, it's a minor inconvenience and nothing much else. Following the board's instruction, we take a hidden passageway into an abandoned airfield. This is where the mod stops being old in the charming 90s car way and starts being old in the frustratingly racist grandpa kind of way. This part of the mod has the old age that's embarrassing to bring out with you in public. I've tried to play Boulder several times over the last years, and more than one attempt has ended here. Why? Well, this area is occupied by American and Chinese ghouls who apparently have been fighting, or at least pretending to fight, since the Great War. This is, from the start, an incoherent premise, of course. It's been too long for these groups to not figure it out, for one to win over the other, or for someone new to find them. The Chinese specifically being here doesn't make much sense at all. Why here, why now? But that's not really what bothered me. I can suspend my disbelief enough to roll with the punches. What bothers me is that this area has some of, if not the worst voice acting and writing in the entire mod. This situation, the American-Chinese conflict, is mostly played for laughs, and while humor is subjective, I personally find it really juvenile in a way that's more annoying than cute. It has no point, it's not funny to me, and, well, not to be a woke moralist, social justice, cultural Marxist soy boy or anything, but one of the characters is written to casually use slurs and make jokes where the punchline is just racism, and the voice acting for the Chinese remnants is, well...
Oh dear! Strange-looking American needs something from me! My leg is badly hurt! I cannot do anything right now! What do you want from me,
So, it seems that the angry American has found someone to do his dirty work for him, It is strange.
Even if you usually disagree with me on these types of things, this is hard to defend, right? I mean, yes, it was 2012 then. You could get away with this stuff, but even if you personally don't think it's offensive, which I think you definitely should, it's still, like, not good on a technical level. You can agree with me there. This is Maggie Chow levels of bad Asian accents.
Mr. J.C. Denton, in the flesh.
Strangely enough, though, this is a side quest with, it appears to me, basically no link at all to the main story or ideas of the mod. The only really important thing here is that they captured the woman from before, who becomes more important later. But she could have just as easily have been captured by the scientist who put out the ad, so as mentioned, there's no point. It's not just bad, it's bad and pointless. It actively dissuades players from continuing, and I know that because that's what it did for me. I quit multiple times after playing this section, remembering why I quit and going, yep, this isn't worth my time. As a player going into this mod, you'd be a lot better off just doing what I did here and getting the whole thing over with. The real main quest starts in this compound, where you meet a scientist with voice acting that's, also bad.
Hello, I'm Dr. Fabler. Have you come in response to our ad? I must say, you look like the ideal candidate. Strong and healthy.
It kind of sounds like he was trying to sound like the scientists in Old World Blues, but on a human body it kind of just sounds odd. He puts you in a room and it's revealed to have been a trick. You're being gassed and knocked out, but unlike the trick in the opening to Dead Money, we already knew it was going to be a trick this time. There's no sting to this deception, there's no surprise or drama, because the quest is, I shit you not, literally titled Taking the Bait. After that, you get a quick opening cinematic that's mostly poorly written, and the footage is in 144p or something. You know, okay, sorry, I'm kind of on a tear here. I don't enjoy being negative or trashing on people's work because everyone's work is valuable in spaces like modding. There are so few people doing anything interesting in this niche, and I'd rather people make things that are bad and interesting than things that are good and uninteresting from an analytical perspective, like a mod that, I don't know, gives Caesar anime girl eyes. I'm stressing the openings problem so much here, not to point my finger and laugh at these amateur developers for doing their best. I'm being so negative here in the hopes that it conveys how poorly the mod starts so that you, like me, will be surprised when it becomes a little more cool and interesting later on. Yo.
Yo, big dog, it's just us. Everybody else is out of the truck right now. What's poppin'? What's good?
I'm recording my video right now. You're on air.
Oh, shit.
The beginning does the mod a major disservice that I'd be remiss to not recreate here. It leads on the wrong foot, and I feel like a lot of people, like me in my previous attempts, assumed it wouldn't get better and stopped here. But it does get better, it just needs a little while to warm up. After being quote-unquote tricked, we find ourselves captured by the Colorado Brotherhood of Steel as a scientific guinea pig, but it appears a successful one. The key plot device of Beyond Boulder Dome is the Seltsam syndrome, a disease that spreads rapidly and, from what I can gather, basically kills you over time by rotting you out. The TV Tropes page describes it as ghoulification on steroids. You become a ghoul, but the process doesn't stop. It keeps going until it kills you. The situation in Colorado is so bad that nearly everyone here has it. Mutations have dominated the area and the disease threatens to spread outward. The Brotherhood, in an experimental trial, intentionally infects us with the syndrome and then cures us of it, essentially giving us an immunity with which we can traverse the area to accomplish their goals for them. The biggest goal here is to use a place with loads of tech to manufacture a cure that we can give to everyone, which is a little weird for the Brotherhood, but we'll get to that. The first objective we're given is to retrieve the formula for our cure, which was lost with the driver that took our knocked out self to Colorado. Unfortunately, we still haven't gotten out of the rough first third of the mod. The roughness here comes because the world is very empty and the combat is dominated by these little guys. These guys run frustratingly fast, so fast that the engine can't keep up with them, and they often end up running off of a cliff and floating through the air before the game can recognize that they're supposed to be falling. They're fast, they're plentiful, and they kind of sound like that kid everyone knew in the 5th grade who insisted on having you hear his Gollum impression like it was the funniest thing in the world, but it really was not that funny. It's annoying more than anything else. They're not fun to fight, or to look at, or to listen to. They're headache fuel. Fortunately, they mostly disappear after this third of the mod. As mentioned, the Brotherhood's plan regarding the syndrome is to cure everyone, but to its credit, the mod doesn't railroad us into working with them, as we do get a choice as to who should be in charge of dealing with the disease. The mod's two options it gives us are the Brotherhood of Steel and the NCR. One of the major criticisms I've seen online of Beyond Boulder Dome is that the factions as presented in the mod are very different to how they're presented in the game, or even the lore of previous games. This is more true for the NCR than the Brotherhood, but both factions are definitely different. The Colorado Brotherhood feels to me like a balance between the Mojave Brotherhood and the Lion's Pride Brotherhood. They're generally uncaring and demeaning to people who aren't useful to them, and this is especially true of their leader. They're also after tech on top of the cure, which is, par for the course. That's Brotherhood of Steel. They are different though in that their main goal is curing the syndrome, which definitely benefits them, but is also a humanitarian act more in line with the Pride from Fallout 3. They also utilize more outsiders than is typical for Western US Brotherhood. If you're a big lore head, maybe this annoys you, but it seems more like a logical evolution from the West Coast Brotherhood than the Lion's Pride is to me personally. The NCR, however, is a significant jump. Far from being the well-meaning but bureaucratic faction we see in New Vegas, the NCR's goal in Boulder is, and this is not an exaggeration, to kill every single person infected with the Seltsam syndrome. This would stop the disease from spreading, and if you question them on it, it's literally as simple for them as the ends justify the means, sometimes harsh choices have to be made for the greater good, blah blah blah, we're evil now. So, in a sense, the aforementioned criticism is technically correct. The factions are a little different from how you might know them, but to me, that's not the problem. To think this way is missing the trees for the forest. Taking old factions to new places can be really interesting if it's done right. By doing this, you can show the player new aspects of what was already there, or show how the faction they once knew might bend or reshape to adapt to new circumstances. But in order for that to happen, the factions have to be well written. The factions in Beyond Boulderdome aren't disappointing to me because they're different. They're disappointing because their differences are unjustified and reductive. It's easy to look at the Colorado NCR and correctly say that they're different and bad, but then make the assumption that due to these two things being true, they must be connected. The NCR here aren't bad and different, they're bad because they're different, and I think that requires a little interrogating. The NCR in New Vegas are quite different to the NCR in Fallout 2, and if you think that their portrayal in Vegas was a step up, you would never say it's as simple as the Mojave NCR are better because they're different. No, if you think they're better, you probably think they're better because they're well written, they're morally gray, and perhaps to you more realistic. The portrayal of the NCR in New Vegas says some significant things about the NCR in Fallout 2. How did we get here? What are the faction's limits now that they're more widespread and they don't have Tandy in charge? These are interesting questions that the New Vegas NCR provokes. The Colorado NCR provokes no such questions. They're an evil faction with evil motivations that does evil things. There's little to no through line between them and the NCR we know. They're raiders with military fatigues. The factions in Beyond Boulderdome aren't bad because they're different because they're bad. As the plot develops, I'll explain a little further why I think this, but if you need any short indication, the leader of the Brotherhood is named Elder Guile, and the leader of the NCR is named Captain Despot. If you have no idea what those words mean, that sounds cool, but come on guys, this is the same problem with the first quest being called Taking the Bait. Where the mod begins to get genuinely interesting, and where it convinced me to not scrap this project entirely, is the actual city of Boulder itself. The city is more like 3 streets, and most of the buildings aren't explorable. This zone still feels restrictive, just like everything else, but this time the restriction works to its benefit. Why this is that the city is patrolled by death squads that are surprisingly difficult to take down. The area is set up for a series of really difficult urban firefights, something you didn't really get in New Vegas proper. These death squads are really interesting story-wise too. They're members of a more radical cell of the NCR comprised fully of ghouls who turn themselves and others, often involuntarily, into ghouls and walk the streets shooting basically anything that moves. Ghoulification is the only way they can withstand the radiation in the city for long periods of time. That's a really cool idea, and the factory they do this in is one of the best combat arenas in the game. But, unfortunately, like many of the ideas the mod introduces, they aren't really elaborated on fully. This mod really likes to introduce something, give it 15 or 20 minutes of playtime, and then move on to the next thing without much follow-through or coherency with the wider narrative. These guys show up once, and then you basically never think about them again. In the Ghoul Factory, we find Kate, that girl from earlier at the airstrip. This is now the second time we've rescued her from being captured, and this time it's not quite as successful. She's been turned into a ghoul, but her look is a good deal different from how we see ghouls in the rest of the game. It's creepy, but more importantly, it's interesting. How does a person cope with this? How do they continue to live their life when their life, literally, was forcibly taken from them? Sorry if I'm sounding like a broken record here, but this is yet another missed opportunity. This interaction is really all we get of Kate. We see her running away at the beginning, we rescue her from the ghoul troops, she comes with us to Colorado, and we rescue her again. Except this time, the head ghoul keeps insinuating a romantic nature to our and her relationship. This hasn't been earned in any way, and it never does get earned. There are several ways the story with Kate could have gone, romance being one of them that I'd really not be happy with. Even for 2012, the female supporting character who only exists to be saved and then romanced is derivative and outdated. Where I do wish they went with it is more into dealing with the aftermath of Kate's ghoulification and trauma over being kidnapped by ghouls twice now. You'd think she'd develop some kind of complex. Maybe she starts to be wary around every ghoul and through interaction with the game's other companion, who we'll get to, learns to be more open again. I don't know. There really are plenty of interesting things that the character could have said, but they say none of them. I really do feel like there's a theme developing here. I can't put my finger on it. There's something. The only thing elsewise worth mentioning here is the toy store. In here is a really interesting side quest that deals explicitly with the paranormal. 2 ghosts of dead children lead us to help free them from the physical bounds of this shop. They've made a pentagram from the toys in the store. It's really creative, and the quest is one of the best things the mod ever does. Just outside of Boulder is an underground community of ghouls, a safe haven from the death squads for now. This is the closest the mod ever gets to feeling dense. Most of the mod's outdoor areas are very empty, and even in the urban areas of Inner Boulder, most of the buildings are inaccessible. This community is a pretty small space, all things considered, but it is packed. This is one, if not the only location with more named NPCs than unnamed ones. We can actually talk to almost all of the people here rather than queuing up for a conversation, having them greet us, saying bye, no other option. Mods love to do this, and they really shouldn't. The immersion you gain from having a populated area is immediately thrashed when everyone in that area says the same thing, and we can't say anything of value to them. Almost every character here is voiced and has some dialogue to them about what they do and who they are. The community has a library, a workshop, a clinic, a big theater where you can interact with some of the actors. It's great.
Good day. I am the Commander-in-Chief, Mr. President Whiskers of the United States of America.
God help me, I don't even know who I am anymore.
So the space is relatively well thought out in terms of what a functional community would need, the NPCs are interesting, and the cherry on top is that, like the thing with the pool cues in the toy store, the way that miscellaneous items are set up in this area feels very intentional and like the people making it really enjoyed doing so. Here we meet another one of the game's companions, Deadpan, a very tall English ghoul writer who fights with a cane. He's really fun, but not deep. Pretty much the same situation as Kate, without any of the implied stereotype damsel in distress stuff. If we bring him enough pencils to help him do his writing, he'll give us his hat. The primary quest in the Ghoul settlement involves getting the access codes to the mysterious Boulder Dome, where the factions of our choosing will seize control and use the dome's technology to exercise their control over the region and put to work their proposed solution to the Seltsam syndrome. Before then, you do a couple odd jobs for the ghouls, the interesting one of the few being to find and bring justice to a troublemaker in the community who has been pulling pranks and messing up everyone's day. This troublemaker ruined Deadpan's manuscript, a crime that cannot be forgiven. Once we do the investigation, we can actually choose to work with the culprit in exchange for the codes, and the game even gives a decent reason for us to do this. The ghoul leader has us running around doing odd jobs and essentially extorting us for these access codes. But, you know, you ruined my boy Deadpan's Fallout / My Little Pony fanfiction, so after we get these codes and decrypt them through one of a few different options, we can gain access to the Boulder Dome, and we can finally talk about the really interesting part of the mod. It's common knowledge at this point that a good amount of the content in Fallout New Vegas was taken from or inspired by the design documents for Van Buren, Interplay's cancelled Fallout 3. The most cited one is the Legion. Caesar's Legion was meant to be a major player in that game, and Obsidian took the concept and made it their own. Another Van Buren concept is the Boulder Dome. According to the wiki and other lore sources I could find, the Boulder Dome was a structure meant to withstand a nuclear attack so that, in the event of a war, the scientists inside could continue their research into the new plague, a virus that would have played a major role in Van Buren. The Boulder Dome itself was actually used as the inspiration for Old World Blues' Big Empty, but the plague never made the cut. For all intents and purposes, the Seltsam syndrome is a replacement for the new plague, and not really one I understand. The new plague has mention in previous and later Fallout games, has more interesting lore and more compelling symptoms. Rather than just being advanced ghoulification, the new plague would have been a hyper-contagious flu that led to intense swelling and hemorrhaging, leading to death or full sterility. The substitution doesn't make much sense or serve much purpose. In this dome, we meet a scientist who agrees to work with our faction of choice if we fix the central computer of the dome and rid it of raiders that the malfunctioning computer seems to have let in. The physical space of the dome itself is eerie because it's been near completely ruined by these raiders. The contrast between the sci-fi shelter of the future and the flickering lights and graffiti is atmospheric and a pleasure to look at. Visually, the dome is my favorite area in the mod by a long shot. When entering one of the dome's pavilions, we hear an eerie voice over one of the terminals.
Bacteria on your hands is a level 1 contamination. Please refrain from touching the terminal.
That's sick. What's sicker is that this area becomes a combat arena with some creative design and presentation. This has been a constant upside for me with the mod's second half. The combat arenas are genuinely fun, something that's pretty rare for similar shooting galleries in this engine, mod or no. In the area, we face down dozens of raiders, some of them hulking chunky guys who fill the absence left by the mod's lack of super mutants. Eventually, you're put into a genuine arena fight where one by one, harder and harder raiders come out to take you on. Alongside these refreshingly polished combat areas are a handful of new weapons and armors, most of which look and feel quite good to use. The environmental armor, the NCR Death Squad armor, and the endgame energy weapons come to mind as the most appealing and memorable. Speaking of these energy weapons, one of these is a semi-automatic Gauss rifle with what seems like infinite range and no damage fall off, which is absolutely as overpowered as it sounds. It's also the most fun thing in the entire mod. Anyway, the central computer. This computer is Zax, a recurring name in the Fallout series, a brand of artificial intelligence supercomputers created by Vault-Tec. There's one in Fallout 1, John Henry Eden in Fallout 3 is a Zax, and the now dead nuclear winter game mode in Fallout 76 was run by a Zax. Boulder Dome has a Zax too, but this one... yeah, he's a little different, you know, he's just a little quirky. The Boulder Dome Zax is a hyper-intelligent, experimented upon chimpanzee. None of these words are in the Bible. There is no real computer, unless you count this guy as more machine than animal, which honestly isn't an unfounded claim to make. The reveal that the entirety of the Boulder Dome is controlled by a tortured monkey is a fun one, considering that it's both a reveal in itself and a reveal that the science occurring in this facility is, to put it mildly, less than ethical. This isn't the only captured and experimented on animal though, so before he resumes computer function, he asks us to kill or set free the other chimpanzees in a different facility. If they die, we'll have slaughtered innocent animals held, tested on, and made victims by a system which places human interests, human ego, above everything else in the world. The same system that caused the Great War. If we set them free, they will inevitably come after those who caused them this pain, the scientists at the Boulder Dome. Destructive humans or destructive apes, one of the few serious moral questions the mod asks us, and my take is simple. Go ape mode. Once the central computer is back online, the lead scientist will let the faction of our choice enter the dome and seize its resources to put an end to the Seltsam syndrome. Well, he'll let the Brotherhood. If you pick the NCR, If we told the scientists originally that we were working with the Brotherhood, we fight through a few waves of NCR troops to get into the dome, and once we do, we meet the predictably named Elder Guile, who reveals to us that he is, in fact, treacherous, cunning, skillful deceit. He's mad with power, and he makes the move that's a little more characteristic of the old Brotherhood. The Brotherhood aren't evil like this, but making it clear to the player that they were actually after the technology the whole time and have no intention of curing people outside the Brotherhood fixes one part of their mischaracterization in the rest of the mod. We kill him, and the mod ends. But after this, we get one last interesting bit of content. Previously, we may have met Harold Johnson, the lead scientist at the Boulder Dome, whose main project is to cure the Seltsam syndrome to save the life of the woman he loves, Sarah, who he's had suspended in a coma. He's aged while she has remained young, and you can tell what's going to happen when she wakes up, especially once we discover after the main quest technically ends that the Harold Johnson we met is an android. The real one is hiding out in a community of feral ghouls away from society because he's been all but totally transformed. When you bring him back to the facility, he brings Sarah out of stasis, and she, predictably, is horrified of what her love has become. But then the NCR leader comes in and fucking murks her. The end, that's it, the mod's over. If we side with the NCR, most of the fundamentals stay the same. Dome, monkeys, battle, except we kill the scientists, and our interaction with Harold comes before the end rather than after it. Going to Harold before the ending, he verbalizes strong opposition to the NCR and their evil practices, and you get the choice to agree with him. If you do, you fight the NCR, and you get a third ending where nobody wins because the NCR leader, still alive, murks Sarah. If you disagree with Harold, you fight the ghouls and kill Sarah yourself on behalf of the leader. Most of this content is the same, but I feel I need to mention the ghoul ending because it's talked about so rarely. I have a sneaking feeling that a lot of the people who made content on this mod over the years only really ever cared enough to play the Brotherhood ending, and then went on to complain that both factions are bad and there's no third ending a la Yes Man in the base game. There is one. It's right here, but you have to choose the evil ending first and then change your mind. Hiding your content like this is bad practice, and it would have been much more fitting if meeting Harold happened before the ending in both the NCR and Brotherhood campaigns. That way, every player would have the option at the ghoul ending, rather than just those who had already committed to an ending involving the slaughter of every ghoul in Colorado. Imagine if you were only able to start the Yes Man ending in New Vegas after you had reached the halfway point of the main plot with Caesar's Legion. Can you imagine how many players would completely miss it even after a few playthroughs? That's Boulder Dome, baby. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much because none of the possible paths are satisfying because they don't really lead to anything. In either case, the faction that we choose turns on us, and even if we manage to get the Harold ending, the NCR's intervention means we kill Harold too. We leave Boulder having done essentially nothing except destroying its major players, which I suppose is the reason why there's no ending slides. The mod ends with the player having changed nothing, and rather than using that fact to make a grand point, like most of the mod, the point is left unspoken. I suppose for people like us in 2022, the point of the mod itself, from a consumer or analytical perspective, is coming to see this potential, watch the mod trip over itself and onto the next piece of potential, and watching it repeat. We have the unique privilege of learning from these missteps where the developers couldn't, and if I had to recommend this mod to anyone, it would be to those wanting that experience. Beyond Boulder Dome is a mod I can't hate, but I also can't like. It did so many things that paved the way for newer mods of its size and scope, and while you could definitely tell it's an old mod, it's hard to believe that something this big was made this early in the lifespan of New Vegas. This was put out merely a year after the last actual DLC for the game was released. While its age is impressive, it is also a detriment. Playing the mod in 2022 feels like pulling teeth because the mod doesn't have many of the creature comforts we expect from our mods now. Basic stability, fully explorable environments, decent microphones, a functional map, none of these are present in Beyond Boulder Dome, so even if you do make it past the god-awful opening hour, it's still likely that you'll end up getting frustrated along the way. I made an analogy at the beginning of this video about the old car and the old man, how remnants of previous times can be romantic or embarrassing. They really don't make him like they used to, as they say, for good and for bad. Even though I think this mod is more bad than it is good, even though I'll never replay it, it's important in a way. We can learn just as much, if not more, from the failings of the past as we can from the successes of it. And at the risk of overusing cliches here, it is evident to me, especially now, that those who do not learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. I'd like to take a moment here to thank all of my patrons, with a special thanks to Spritz, Adam Souza, and Jack Bradley for pledging at the highest level. All of my patrons get videos early, as well as development updates, behind the scenes, and other goodies, so if you'd like to support the channel and this mod review series, you can pledge on a per video basis at my Patreon in the description. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.